Through 2 decades, 17 classic albums, countless unforgettable concert triumphs, they changed the face of British rock music forever. And the best part is, they're back.
Spinal Tap, get out there, you're on!
Now, they're on the verge of the greatest comeback of all time.
Rock and roll! Hello, Cleveland!
This is their moment.
Go right straight through this door here, down the hall. Yeah. Turn right.
Their time has come.
Rock and roll!
Any minute now. Any second.
Hello, stage!
I think we're lost.
The little jog there, about 30 feet. Jog to the left.
Get ready. Get set.
Direct from hell, Spinal Tap.
Heavy metal's deep. You can get stuff out of it.
My name is Marty DeBerge. I'm a filmmaker.
One man dares to probe the hidden secrets.
I was just pointing at it.
Well, don't point even.
Don't even point?
No, it can't be played. Never. I mean,
Can I look at it?
No.
One man dares to hear the shocking answers
It's tragic, really. He exploded on stage.
to questions like, is the world really ready for Spinal Tap?
You put a greased, naked woman on all fours with a dog collar around her neck and a leash. And pushing a black glove in her face to sniff it. You don't find that offensive?
No,
you don't
no.
find that sexist?
Well, you should have
Listen
seen
to
the
me.
cover they wanted to do.
Get me out!
After years of vicious gossip,
The official explanation was he choked on vomit. Well, they can't prove whose vomit it was.
years of ugly rumors,
It's a passing thing. This is a fact.
And you are Spinal Tap?
Oh, what's going on here? Hi.
now the vicious, ugly truth can be told.
Well, I'm sure I'd feel much worse if I weren't under such heavy sedation. Tap into America!
From the place where eardrums go to die, come the living legends of rock and roll lunacy. This is Spinal Tap.
You know, it's like Hemingway said, remember them as they were and write them off.
Hello and welcome to the Retro Movie Club podcast. My name is Blake and I'm here with Rich. Say hello, Rich.
Hello, Rich.
And
You knew that was coming.
say again?
You knew that was coming.
Oh yeah. Comedy genius, aren't you? And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the 1984 film Spinal Tap, which Richard chose in the last episode for us to watch and talk about. In the last episode, I mentioned that I'd only ever seen it once before. I think it's probably about 10 years ago. And you kindly lent me the Blu-ray because you only live up the road from me. Which I finished watching today. I started watching it yesterday, and you've watched it as well.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of just a little bit of information about the film before we talk about some of the details of it. If you've not yet watched it and you want to, feel free to pause this podcast, or at least stop it and then go watch the film and then come back and listen to us. Or if you're not really that bothered, just carry on listening anyway. It's fine. Doesn't bother me. Came out in 1984. It's what's classed as one of the first mockumentary films. So obviously it's a fictional. I don't know if you could call it fictional, really, because ultimately after the film, the band went on to become quite popular. We'll talk.
Yeah, I say we'll talk about it in more detail, but it kind of does bleed over into real life.
It does. I've got more to say on that actually with some of the interviews, but yeah, it was made up out of thin air. It was scripted by the four main people that were involved in the film, and it was just effectively a piss take of what it's like in a rock band and making a fictional documentary, a mockumentary. So yes, is there anything you want to say about the film, Rich, to start off with? Because you chose it. So
yeah, I mean, I will say, I mean, much as I said in the previous episode, really, it's a film that I picked because I do feel like it's an absolute classic, and I picked it largely. I mean, I watched it in the first place largely because I am into that kind of 80s like rock and hair metal type music. So it kind of
hair metal.
Yeah, you never heard that term before, like the.
No, I've heard of cock rock. I haven't heard of hair metal. If that's the same difference.
Yeah, it's kind of the same, really. It's kind of all the sort of the Motley Crue bands and the Poison from that 80s Sunset Strip era. So it does appeal to me on that level, but also I just really, really wanted to watch the film again because I think, as I previously said, it was a film that I'd had on VHS, but I mean I haven't had a VHS video player for a good number of years now. So the VHS copy of Spinal Tap I have is currently sitting in the loft gathering dust up there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I've never really gone such a long time before between viewings of films that I really like. I mean, I may go sort of maybe 1 or 2 years between watching my absolute favourites. It's just sort of long enough for you to sort of not be able to recite everything line by line and just be able to enjoy it again. But yeah, this one, I just feel it needed to be watched, and I think, as we'll go into in a little bit, I think it does serve as the basis for quite a lot of subsequent comedy series from in later years. So
yeah.
I think for that reason, it's quite an important film.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with that. I think the gaps between watching some of my favourite films are a lot bigger than yours, that's for certain. I think it's one of the reasons why we started doing the podcast, really, was to force us back into watching some classics again, and maybe some not so classics in the future. We'll wait and see what my suggestion is at the end. So I said in the kind of like the preview episode that we did a couple of weeks ago that I'd heard of Spinal Tap, and I first got into it through a suggestion through someone that I used to work with that was in a band. And I think after watching the film, I think if you have anything to do with the music industry or being in a band, I think you must participate in this film on a different level to anyone else. But yeah, I still get some of the things. Before I go into talking about some of the other documentaries that are available about it, because obviously what we do, for anyone that's not listened to the show before, we'll watch the film, and then well, I don't know how Richard does it, but I like to watch the film first without knowing too much about it, especially if it's one that I've not seen before. And then I'll go off and I'll have a look on Wikipedia and filming locations and all the other things that I like to do about the film afterwards. I only watched the film, I only finished watching the film this afternoon, so some of the stuff that I would usually research afterwards, I did a little bit beforehand, but not too much to ruin the film. I say ruin the film, I mean, like, I watched it 10 years ago, but even still, there were bits in the film that I can't remember the first time I watched it, or bits that didn't stand out as much as I did the second time, or even just like little jokes and things like this. So I just want to go over.
I think it's that type of film actually that you could watch over and over again. Each time you would notice something a little different. It's like there's certainly, like you said, there's certainly things that I've noticed this time that I can't remember noticing the last few times I watched it.
Yeah. I mean, we'll come on to him in a bit, but just to, I suppose that's the beauty of just like leaving gaps, but also as well when we're doing the film club, and I know I mention this every time, but like actually sitting down and concentrating on the film, I can't imagine that's not how some of the people that made the films would expect you to watch a film, but I get more from it from dedicating like my eyes and my ears to it completely, instead of having to worry about all the other things that come off in the background in family life. So, I just want to cover some of obviously the main actors, people that are in the film. It starts off with, obviously, you've got Martin DeBurgi, or DeBurgi, I don't know, or Marty, which obviously is played by Rob Reiner, who was one of the guys that originally came up with the idea, who played a good role. I suppose a lot of the time he's behind the camera, but he just looked like your atypical director in my head, especially if he's got that cap on and that beard. It's just like, definitely.
Definitely.
We've got Harry Shearer, who plays Derek Smalls, the bass player. Harry Shearer, I know him. Well, I kind of know him more as Handsome Dan in the Wayne's World films, but obviously he does a lot of the a lot of the main characters in The Simpsons. So, quick quiz: can you name some of the characters that he does the voices to? Come on, Rich, give me four. Okay, give me one.
Does he do Homer?
He doesn't do Homer. No. He does Mr. Burns, Waylon Smithers, Principal Skinner, Ned Flanders, Reverend Lovejoy, Kent Brockman, and up until this year he did Dr. Hibbert. But now all the white people that used to voice black actors have stopped doing it now because of the situation of, what's going on. I'm not going to open that can of worms. But yeah, he doesn't do Dr. Hibbert anymore. So, excuse me.
That situation is not for this podcast.
No, it's not. So, and then you've got the character Nigel Tufnell, who is the lead guitarist, and he's played by Christopher Guest.
Yeah.
We've got Nigel Tufnell, who is the lead guitarist, who's played by Christopher Guest, who, for me, especially when I come on to some of the documentaries that were made afterwards, I think he lives in that role quite a bit. And then I was just having a quick look at his Wikipedia page before we did the recording and realised that obviously he's now known for doing those mockumentary type films. And I'm thinking,
yes,
yeah.
There's quite a number of them actually that I've watched one or two of them that are really quite good. The one that sort of springs to mind, I think, was For Your Consideration, which is kind of like a satirical look at the whole Oscar nominations process, which you wouldn't necessarily expect that to have made a particularly funny film, but actually the way that he does it that was excellent. So I think if you're going to sort of go on from from Spinal Tap and like move on to a different Christopher Guest film, that I think would be one I would definitely recommend.
Yeah, I mean, I can watch a documentary about anything, so I suppose if you can watch a documentary about anything, you can watch a mockumentary about anything, so you don't necessarily need to know about anything, do you? So I'll have to see if I got time for that one. We'll see. So, another thing as well, he's also married to Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah, I didn't know that up until a couple of weeks ago.
I know, yeah.
Actually.
Why is she not in Spinal Tap? Well, I suppose he might not have been married to her by then. I'm not sure, but I can imagine she'd be quite good in Spinal Tap, I reckon. So.
Oh, yeah, I would have thought so. Although, I'd imagine at the time they were doing Spinal Tap, she was probably doing Trading Places, maybe?
Yeah.
So it's around the same time.
Yeah. And then obviously you've got David Hubbins, who's played by Michael McKean, who
also on the subject of who these people are married to. He's married to the, I don't know if you remember the actress who played Lana Lang in Superman 3.
I didn't know that.
Superman's alternative love interest to Lois Lane for that film.
Oh yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, there you go. So, but he's an actor that I'd seen before I'd watched Spinal Tap in quite a few other things. I know him more so. He plays like an FBI agent in the film Clue.
Yes.
But then looking at some of the other films he's been in, he was in Planes, Trains and Automobiles. I can't remember him in that film.
No, I don't remember him in that, actually.
He's in Earth Girls Are Easy, which I don't think I've ever watched, but I know it was a fairly popular film back in the day.
Yeah.
He was in Short Circuit 2, which I do remember because he's quite a definitive bad guy. He was in a film called Flashback, which I've not watched before.
No.
Memoirs of an Invisible Man, which I've watched quite a few times, but I can't picture his face in that film. I can't match it up with a particular scene or a character. Coneheads, and there's a few other films. I'm only picking out ones here that I would know, and so if I would know it, because we've got similar tastes, I imagine you might know it as well. But ultimately, I can't help but just associate him with I can't help but associate him with the Mocklet guy from Friends. That's how I know him the most now. So.
I'd actually forgot about that one until you reminded me.
Yeah, it's just like he kind of owns the scene a little bit. It's just like the little bit where just where like he turns around and goes, "Anywho," and it's just like just that one line just makes it so iconic in that episode. Just like,
I think that is probably the reason why anybody for the last 20 odd years has continued a conversation by going, "Anywho."
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Should stake some claim to it, get some copyrights.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So. Okay, those are pretty much the main actors in the film. There's a couple of others that I just want to bring up actually, because we have the guy that plays. Oh, I've lost his name in the film. The actor's name is Tony Hendra, and he plays obviously the tour manager. I was trying to think what his name is in the film now. I've lost it.
It's isn't it Ian something?
Ian Faith. The there we go.
That's
Ian
it.
Faith. So I thought he played quite a good role. Looking at his Wikipedia page, realised that he only passed away fairly recently, 4th of March 2021, so just over a month ago, 79 years old.
Wow.
And also he was more known for the being the head writer and the co-producer of the first 6 shows of Spit and Image. So he was one of the guys that originally came up with the idea, and then came Spinal Tap, and those are the 2 main things that he's known for anyway. So, and the only other actor that I want to mention of particular interest for me is the guy that's the limo driver, who is Bruno Kirby. who I know from. I also know more so from City Slickers. He's one of the three friends, and he died at the age of 57 from leukemia in 2006. I didn't know that he'd gone, but yeah, he played your atypical American accent in that film, doesn't he? So.
Oh, without a doubt, definitely. But I don't know if you noticed, though. I mean, if you kind of just segueing into the City Slickers part there, that I didn't realise until this watch through that one of the mimes near the start of the film was actually played by Billy Crystal.
I know. When I was listening to it and I heard the voice and I thought that sounds like Billy Crystal, but you can't easily tell that it's him because of obviously all the makeup, the mime stuff that he's got on, and then his name comes up in the credits and I'm thinking, oh, it was him. So because there's not that many people that have worked on the film, the credits are really slow moving and they're quite big, so you get a chance to actually read the words, unlike something like Tron, where it's got like a million names and it's like just flying up the screen. So, but I
was quite amazed about that. 'Cause it's such a small role, and you would not expect somebody like Billy Crystal to have been in that role. I mean, I don't know if it was sort of like before really became quite a well-known actor, but I mean, it's still surprising to me anyway that he was in that sort of role.
Yeah, true. So that's my coverage of the of some of the actors that are in it. Anyway, if you're going to talk about some of the let's talk about what happened after the film came out.
Okay.
So, I don't know. I haven't looked too much. I haven't had that much time to look into the timeline of events. But when you go into YouTube and you type in Spinal Tap, all of a sudden you start getting videos for them appearing at Live Aid at Wembley Stadium, which I watched.
Yeah, I remember watching that.
Glastonbury. They appeared at Glastonbury. So of course, I'm going to bring up this one particular clip that's on YouTube that was one of the first ones that I watched actually before I watched the film, because there's a lot of the things that I keep referring to back in this documentary, but there's an interview that all four of them did. So obviously the three music players and the director, which are the original, they wrote the film. They did an interview with a guy called Harry Smith who works for the Today show. It's not Today show. It's just called Today. Anyway, it was an interview that he did with them. It's about 20 minutes long, so it's not a very long interview at all, but it's really interesting for a number of different things. It's fairly recent. It was done in 2020, so kind of Harry Shearer looks old in the recording, but they've still got it, and you can see that they jump into those characters as it's like they've been doing it their whole life, which I'm sure they have, because obviously they've been doing. Michael McKean describes in that interview how he I can't remember how he described it now, but he knows how to play guitar, and obviously it's him who's playing that musical instrument. And then he told his dad he wanted to be an actor, and his dad said, no, you can't be an actor, you've got to get a fallback job. And he said, oh yeah, it's okay, I can play the guitar, that's my fallback job. And it's just like, oh my word. So knowing that this is where it's difficult, because you can call them actors, but then they're not. They're also musicians, because obviously the music that they played, the soundtrack for the Spinal Tap film came out on album, and they've released 2 more albums after that, as well as appearing on live shows. So it's like a bit of a crossover. It's like the mockumentary made the band, and now the band are making money, and it's all a bit. It's a bit of a head mess.
It's almost like you can't actually definitively say that this is a fictional band. I mean, obviously it was when the mockumentary came out, but like you say, they've done a number of albums and appearances at massive festivals, and I mean Live 8, which I can remember watching a few years back. So I mean, it's kind of transformed into actually being a band.
Yeah.
It's
weird,
really quite weird.
Yeah.
And also another thing that did strike me as being slightly weird about the whole thing was that through the mockumentary, you're actually the humour comes from how inept the band and the tour management are at pretty much everything, and the fact that that Spinal Tap is supposed to be a fairly sort of like washed up, over the hill rock dinosaur type of band, but actually when you go and listen to the soundtrack album and the albums that have come out since, some of the music on that is actually like it's pretty decent. So then you're kind of actually thinking, like, really, is the joke actually on the audience, because we're laughing at how rubbish they are, but actually they're actually pretty bloody good at what they're doing.
They are. I mean, like, I know that you had the film, so I was waiting for you to watch it so you could bring it round to my house. So in that time, I then thought, well, I'm not going to ruin it by listening to some of the songs. I'm thinking, I say ruin it. Like, I already watched the film once, so I know what it's about. But, there's little bits that you pick up. So I thought, I'll see if there's any of their music on Spotify. And then I obviously found the soundtrack album. And I know I've already just discussed to you that I was listening to one of their songs, which is Big Bottom. And I was thinking, I can't get this song. I haven't been able to get this song out of my head for like the last week and a half. And when you've got kids and you're in a workplace with other people, you need to watch what you're singing in your head. So,
but you just can't leave this behind.
Yeah. So yeah, and I know I messaged you the other day because I was looking to get the original This Is Spinal Tap album.
Oh yes, I meant to ask you about that.
It went for £28 in the end, which is it's more than I would want to pay for it, obviously, because I didn't win. Yeah. But then when you compare the only other two versions of the original soundtrack are on eBay for a buy now price of £175. One's for £100 and the other one's for £75. You think, oh, okay, so it's obviously still fetching a fair price. So
yeah, well, vinyl prices are ridiculous in general at the moment.
Yeah. So yeah, this Harry Smith interview with them, I definitely recommend, if for anyone that's watched Spinal Tap, to go off and watch this, because there's quite a few things that they bring up in it. The Christopher Guest, who obviously plays the lead guitarist Nigel Tufnell, you could see almost like he's still in character for almost the entirety of this documentary. So every now and again he breaks out, but on all the other interviews that they've done with these three guys, because this one also includes the director, but this usually the other YouTube clips I've seen of them interviewing Spinal Tap, it's just obviously the three band members, and they're in character the whole time. Whereas this one, they kind of come out of it now and again, and then step back in and come out of it. And Harry Shearer goes on to talk about some of the legal rights with the music, and about how some of those things are still ongoing, even though it's been so many years after it come out. But if you think about how much money they must have made, not only the film but also the soundtrack as well. Going back to something you were saying about the Live Aid performers, I mean, if you read about what some professional musicians think of the film, it really is interesting. On this interview, this Harry Smith interview, Michael McKean is talking, I think it's him, it might have been Rob Reiner actually, he was talking about how they were talking to someone that was in the music industry about the film and what they were doing, and they were showing him a preview of the film, and in particular they were showing like the scene where they're all trying to get to the stage, and they all get lost backstage, and they're all going all over the place. And this guy said, "This isn't funny. Is this meant to be funny? This isn't funny because this is actually what happens." It's just like, and yeah. So a lot of musicians seem to strike a chord with that scene, as well as I imagine some of the others as well.
I did actually think while I was watching that scene when they were sort of running around backstage, that it kind of makes you wonder how many times that does actually happen to actual bands in real life. And you think with the sort of the maze of corridors and one-way systems, whatever that they probably need to go, it must happen quite often. In fact, while I was doing my research into this, I did find out that this did happen to Blink 182 at a certain point. I can't remember where they said they were playing, but they said that during one song, which I think was "If You Find Yourself Caught in Love," the singer has a cordless microphone, and he would sort of disappear during the instrumental part of the song and sort of reappear like in the balconies or in the crowd, wherever it was sort of a strategic sort of an all surprising place for him to appear. But at this one gig, which I think it was in Australia, the idea was that he would sort of disappear off stage and then come sort of like back on the balcony as planned, and somehow managed to lose his way and end up in a local shopping centre.
Wow, I haven't heard that one.
No, I'm not sure if sort of whether the band just had to play on without him, or whether he was having to try and sing this song from the shopping centre.
Oh, I really hope that's the case. It just within my head, I've got Check Out Tills going beep beep in the background as he's trying to sing his solo. One last thing I want to say about the Harry Smith interview as well is obviously because it's got Rob Reiner in. I didn't realise the first time I watched the film that it was completely, unscripted. All that they did is talk about the history of the band and the individual characters of where they come from, and then when they're recording it, that's just stuff that happens. The fact that it's non-scripted. I mean, the only other person that I know that works well for non-scripted stuff is Bill Murray. Because apparently he does that all the time. Like, he literally rips scripts up and just makes his own stuff up. And considering what he's like in films, that obviously works. And the only other one I know is Robin Williams, who obviously as some of his stand-up comedy as well, where he just you can see him rip into the crowd. You can see where that comes from. It's just but for them to do the whole film with nothing scripted and for it to be so funny as well. Harry Shearer in that interview talks about some of the scenes that crack him up the most. And I remember before I watched the film again, and I was just thinking of some of the scenes that made me laugh the first time I watched it. It is obviously that scene where Christopher Guest is playing that really nice melodic piano symphony, and there's there's a big discussion about his influences and where it comes from, and then right at the end he said, "Oh yeah, that's called Lick My Love Pump," and in this interview, Rob Reiner says that particular scene, that cracked him up. He couldn't hold it for that. And when I watched it again this second time, you can see that about 2 seconds after he says "Lick My Love Pump," it cuts and it goes to another scene. So.
Yeah, it's a very sudden cut.
Yeah,
it's scenes like that. You do think there must have been a lot of stuff in that film that must have taken God knows how many takes to get through, just for the fact that they would have been cracking up laughing at some of the stuff that they were coming out with. I mean, I can especially see how that "Lick My Love Pump" scene could have taken all day to get through, because just the fact that I don't think that no matter how many times you say it, that does not stop being
No,
funny.
no. I don't think you could even you'd be able to. I don't think you'd be able to do it again because you'd know what was coming, and that's not going to work for the filming style. So yeah. Another thing that I like to do with some of these films is to have a look at where some of the filming locations are done.
Yes.
There's a few, but I've only because I've quickly just to research. It's just the one I should mention is the Raymond Theatre in Pasadena in America, which is where a lot of the videos from the film are shot of the band playing. They're all done in this one place, and the reason why I bring this up is it's also the same theatre that features in Pulp Fiction. It's the place where Bruce Willis has his boxing fight before he has to Scarpa because he's not gone the way he was supposed to go. So that is those two are the same filming locations. So that's as much as on film locations as I'm going to mention on this one. So
that's quite an unexpected connection between those two films, really, isn't it? You wouldn't have necessarily connected Spinal Tap to Pulp Fiction.
No. One for a quiz later down the line at some point, I should imagine. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, is there anything else you want to say about the film?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a few sort of little like bits about it.
Hit me, Rich.
I mean, I think we've gone through some of the actual scenes from the film, so I'm not going to sort of get too hung up with going through.
Can I just mention? Can I just mention about the Stonehenge scene?
Go on.
I can't remember when I first watched the film that being such a big deal. And what I mean is, I knew of the scene when I first watched it, but then when I watched it again, I realised that actually, that's not only do people find that one of the most funniest scenes in the film, but you can see there's quite a definitive start and end point to that scene. You know, and it goes on for a little bit. So like, there's the build up to it where they finally realise that the model is actually the finished model because he's put it down as 18 inches. And then when it's been lowered down on the zip wire, and you can just see Michael McKean just looking up at it, thinking, "What the is this coming down here?" And then I was meant to write it down before we started recording, but then there's the bit afterwards, the fallout, and it was. He goes on about the fact that we had a stage prop that was about to be crushed by a dwarf. It kind of negates the enormousness of the scene that it was meant to be telling.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but with that scene, I mean, even when you hear the actual song itself without seeing the scene on screen, when you hear that sort of lute, like interlude where it goes you could almost like see the dwarf like dancing around Stonehenge. It's like they've obviously sort of purposely written that part of the music to sort of kind of conjure up those like images for you, and it just like, you know, you can be sitting in the car on the way home just absolutely cracking up about that scene. But yeah, you have sort of actually unwittingly there segued into one of the points that I was going to make about the film.
Okay. So
well done for that. You're making it look like there's an air of professionalism about this.
It's the only professional thing we've got going for us. So.
But yeah, one of the things that I did want to speak about actually about the film was probably maybe not something you would expect to us to be speaking about, was actually the some of the influence on real life of Spinal Tap. Not sort of I mean, not as we've discussed with the band sort of transcending from that kind of fictional status to an actual band status, but actually their influence on other bands and on other sort of like art forms even. I mean, with the to sort of go back into the whole Stonehenge thing, that was actually, well, I won't say it was based on real life, because I think it was, looking at some of the sources in my research, I do think that it was actually a coincidence that this happened around the same sort of time. Because the film itself, as we discussed, came out in 1984, was it?
Yes.
Yeah. So, but actually, the year before, in 1983, so probably going over into 1984 for the actual tour, Black Sabbath had recorded an album called Born Again, which was, I think, the one album they did with the Deep Purple singer Ian Gillan, which I think was, I mean, as an aside, quite an underrated album, but I won't get into that too much. So that's
calm down, Rich. Calm down.
That's for a totally different podcast, I think. But actually, on that album is a song called Stonehenge, and it's more, well, it's not really a song as in the traditional sense. It's more of kind of like a couple of minutes of like atmospheric sound, really, that the band have recorded. But the story goes, and there's two different versions of it, but the singer Ian Gillan blames the bassist Geezer Butler for the whole thing, and Geezer Butler blames their manager for the whole thing. But they actually also wanted to have a Stonehenge set for their stage show for that tour. Only their manager basically did something very similar to what happened on Spinal Tap, except for they didn't give the measurements too small; they gave them far too big. So they actually wanted a Stonehenge set that was 15 foot tall. What they ended up with was a Stonehenge set that was 15 meters tall.
Wow!
And basically, they had I think they had 3 of these sort of massive Stonehenge rocks, which they then could not get into a single venue because it was obviously far too big. So yeah, apparently those Stonehenge props possibly still in a New York storage container.
Oh,
in the
wow!
box somewhere. So that would be quite a fun.
Yeah, I don't know who's buying those though.
Oh God! I'll say that. I mean, apparently, the place that they were rehearsing for this tour was at the Birmingham NEC, which, as you know, is quite a sizable venue. But even in there, they couldn't get this set in through the doors to even sort of like rehearse. So they never ended up playing a single show. Well, I think they might have played maybe a couple of outdoor festivals with the set, but that was about it. But also, I mean, for the film's influence on real life, there's a couple of other sort of instances. One quite amusingly, you remember in the film where they were talking about Spinal Tap's album Shark Sandwich, and it got the review of shit sandwich.
Yeah.
Apparently, this in 2006, the NME magazine were reviewing Def Leppard's covers album, which was I think it was just called Yeah. And they wrote a one-word review of it, which was just nah. 0 out of 10 mark with just the word nah.
Wow.
So that was very Spinal Tap, I thought. But also, I mean, going into other art forms, as I've said, well, it depends on whether you consider this to be an art form or not. But the film has actually had a couple of influences on the world of professional wrestling as well.
Oh, okay.
Which actually, both of which centre around Chris Jericho, which I think is more due to the fact that he is a massive rock and Spinal Tap fan.
He looks like a rock fan.
Yeah, well, he is. He's actually the lead singer of the band Fozzy.
Oh, okay.
If you get chance to get on Spotify and listen to them, they've got some pretty decent songs. But quite a number of years ago, I think it was around 1997 when he would have been in WCW at the time. He was doing a parody. I think because his match was against this other guy who was on a massive unbeaten streak, and this guy sort of had an entrance which I don't think he actually meant it to be a sort of homage to Spinal Tap, but it would show you the guy sort of bursting out from his dressing room and sort of going to the ring and this, that, and the other. You can imagine. Chris Jericho sort of did a parody of this entrance where basically showed you him sort of bursting out from his dressing room and sort of going down various corridors and can't find his way to the ring and making a massive fuss about not being able to find his way there. And it's very, very much like the Spinal Tap scene, which he has since said that's basically where he ripped it off from. And the other instance of him channeling Spinal Tap is a bit more recently in his current wrestling company that he's in. I think he was the first world champion in that company, and he did a backstage sort of interview stroke promo for a good 10 minutes after winning this match, where he sort of went by abusing everybody that was backstage before getting to the buffet table and picking up little ham sandwiches with a ham hanging out, and little olives with the little red bit in, and going, "Hello, look, what's this little fella doing? There's one in here, but there's not one in here. What's going on?" So yeah, Spinal Tap does kind of seem to get everywhere really in sort of terms of popular culture, especially within the certain sort of rock culture. I would say, I think among the people who would sort of get that humour, it does sort of it's got a lot of mileage to it to have been sort of going sort of right from 1984 right up until much the present day, really. So there's quite a lot of stuff there with of kind of Spinal Tap sort of spilling over into real life. Yeah.
But it still keeps giving, doesn't it? I mean, like
exactly.
You can see the guys like like Harry Shearer, especially. I've seen quite a few videos. So there's one on YouTube at the moment where he seems to be doing some kind of promo work for some shop somewhere because he's got loads of fans in, and then he's there dressed up as Derek Smalls playing the bass, playing Big Bottom, and like the whole shop is like singing along to it, and it's just it's just one of those things. I'd like to. I wonder if they thought how popular it was going to be, back in the day.
Yeah. I do wonder. I mean, I can't imagine they would ever have imagined it could have quite the level of longevity that it has had.
Yeah.
So it was especially. I would say it's probably one of the earliest. I could be wrong, but possibly one of the earliest examples of that type of comedy. I would have thought as well. So I can't really remember seeing any sort of earlier mockumentaries.
No. Well, a lot of people have said it was the first of its kind, really.
Yeah.
Some people have even associated it with, the kind of like the Borats and all the other non-real documentaries that have followed.
Yeah. I don't think without having Spinal Tap, you don't get Borat or The Office even. You know.
Yes.
And you know that I know that I think it may still be on all four, but there is a great couple of documentaries actually that I think were aired on Channel 4 a few years back, where Ricky Gervais, obviously of The Office fame, goes and interviews, in one instance, interviews Christopher Guest. So kind of interviews him about all of his films, from sort of Spinal Tap right up until I think the For Your Consideration film that we mentioned earlier on, and also I think he goes and interviews Larry David on another one of those documentaries, which, and the two aren't necessarily sort of together as such, because they are separate documentaries. But I think, as we spoke about earlier, with the amount of improvisation that's in Spinal Tap and in Christopher Guest films in general, that you kind of get to sort of see how much of an influence that has had on Ricky Gervais's career, and also from that into the Larry David interview, where he works quite similarly to Christopher Guest as well. He'll have a sort of outline of a scene or scenes, but then completely improv everything around it. Yeah. So you can see just how much of a massive influence Spinal Tap has had on not just on a particular genre, but kind of culture in general.
Absolutely,
really.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think if anybody does want to check out those other documentaries, I think they're called Ricky Gervais Meets. So obviously one's Ricky Gervais meets Christopher Guest, the other one is Ricky Gervais meets Larry David. So both a good sort of point to go off and watch those documentaries in relation to this film.
Absolutely. And definitely go onto Spotify and start listening to some of their music as well, because you might find an absolute gem like I did. So, I started having a look actually, because I thought, I'd love to include like the Big Bottom at the end of this podcast, just to like play it out at the end. That'd be brilliant for anyone that's not heard it before. But then I started looking at the legal implications. I thought, could you get a cover band, and could you get that? But it's sort of no, not even if there's any kind of audio that sounds similar, even if it's just a second of audio relating to something that someone's released for money, you can get into trouble if you use it. But there's a way to get around it on YouTube, because YouTube will automatically scan things that are uploaded, and if there's anything in there that sounds like something that already exists that is copyrighted, any revenue that comes through the adverts on that video, it will pass on to the record company. So you can, in some situations, you can actually use music that's been officially released and stuff. So I'm hoping that if I do a version of this podcast and put it on YouTube, we will have the song at the end. So there we go. If not, just click on the link in the show notes and just play it. So
maybe as a way to get around it, if you just sing it at the
end. You can't even do that, I don't think. So even if you do it, even if you're doing a cover of the song, if someone really doesn't want you to do the cover of the song, then they can hit you with a copyright strike. So.
Wow, well, better not risk that then.
Wow.
Even fewer people will listen to this.
My last thoughts on talking about Spinal Tap is just to talk about some of the different versions. I don't know of if there are any different versions. I know on the Blu-ray that you sent to me, there was an up to 11 option. I didn't switch that on before I watched the film, so I don't know what that activates. Do you know?
Yeah, no, I don't actually, because I just watched it sort of as it was.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I don't know if it I'm assuming it makes some kind of difference to the sound, which probably could have done with, because I think on my edition of the film, I don't know if it was just the fact that the way it's coming through my speakers on my setup, but the dialogue was quite quiet in a lot of places. And whereas then when the music kicked in, it was massively loud. So I was kind of constantly having to do that thing where you kind of turn it up for certain scenes, then turning it down again when the music came on. So, it kind of does detract a little bit when things are like that.
I didn't notice that as much, but I am watching these films now as we're going through them on my monitor and through headphones. Just because I can get closer to my monitor if I want it to appear bigger, and it's just a nicer screen than my telly, to be honest. So, anything else you want to say about the film before we move on? I don't suppose you've got any reviews there, have you?
I have got a couple of reviews.
They're not all shit sandwich ones, are
they? No. It's, to be honest, I do find it quite difficult finding funny reviews about a comedy film. Yeah. Especially a comedy film that is great, because then I always like the reviews where the sort of the comedy comes from somebody sort of slagging the film off, or getting the wrong end of the stick about something. But there's very few of those sort of reviews. So I have got a couple of reviews. So, do you want me to go through them now, or have you got?
You can, but before I forget it, just for some reason, something that you said about making people laugh. It was only a small saying in the film, but for some reason it really made me chuckle. And it's the scene where they are getting lost backstage, and there's that guy that appears to be some kind of caretaker or plumber or something, and they're excuse me, they're asking him how to get back to the stage, and he was saying, you turn left here, then you turn right here, and then you have a little jog. And he went, what? A little jog, like a left right, and then Harry Shearer says, we haven't got time for that. And they just like that, him saying that, which I didn't pick up the first time, really made me laugh. And it's only a simple little line, so. But yeah, carry on. Reviews.
So I've only picked out sort of 3 of them. So the first one I've got, I picked up from Common Sense Media, which is sort of the website that people can go to see if a film is suitable for their kids.
Okay.
So if we've got. The main review I've got from there is the more adult humour in this will go over kids' heads. There is a little language. Some group is in tight outfits. Seems more like a recommendation. Who are just sitting around the band in various scenes, and some sexual innuendo the kids won't get. The most extreme thing is Derek Smalls removing a foil-wrapped cucumber from his pants in an airport metal detector.
Yeah, I do like that scene. So.
Yeah, that was good. I mean, I did pick that into that review just for the fact that it made me laugh remembering Derek Smalls getting that cucumber out of his pants.
Just before you go on to your next review, I know I'd already watched Spinal Tap, because I know I'd started the workplace where I work now, and it's based in Telford. One of the guys who works there, Andy, he's a Shrewsbury Town fan, and obviously it's a Shrewsbury Town football top that Derek Smalls is wearing in that scene. Do you know the blue, and the kind of orangey yellow stripe? It's the.
I was wondering which team that was.
Yeah. Because Derek Smalls, obviously Harry Shearer, he's got like a whole back history, and when you start looking into it, he says, "Oh yeah, he's from like the Midlands area," and they've obviously researched just something about the Midlands that they can add in, and they picked Shrewsbury Town, but apparently Shrewsbury Town fans now see that as quite a big thing for them to include. So it's quite a what's the word to use? It's they think it's a big part of their history to include that and to let people know about it. So.
Excellent. Well, why not? Yeah, I mean, the other couple of reviews I've got, both from Amazon. I mean, the one is headed, "It's a cliche," but this gets an 11 out of 10. Yeah, we've just got. Having been involved in the music business for many years, I can truly say that although a comedy rockumentary, this film isn't actually all that far from the truth, as I think we discussed a bit ago. A bit of hyperbole here and there, but otherwise it hits the mark. Saying that if you've got no involvement in music, you'll find this film absorbing and very funny. So it kind of harks back to what you said about showing the film to somebody involved in the music industry who didn't actually think it was funny because he's seen a lot of these things happen.
Yeah.
So I did think it was quite amusing in itself. And then the last review, we've just got the film basically revolves around the rock band Spinal Tap, their excesses and their fall from the top as their music tastes change within the record company and management goes from mistake to mistake. All the characters are larger than life, but oddly endearing and believable. The scene with the customized amplifiers is the most often cited, but there are many more. For example, the pods used to start a concert which don't open, and the miniature Stonehenge.
Yeah.
And then the review finishes off with just one more thing. My cousin's a drummer. What's his life insurance premium likely to be? But yeah, that was all I picked up from reviews, because obviously it's as I said, it's a classic film which everybody likes. So like, there's not really sort of too much more comedy really to be gleaned from the reviews, unfortunately.
No.
I think maybe if we watch some kind of B film in future, we might get a few more funny comments.
Maybe. So yeah, that's Spinal Tap. We haven't even mentioned the up to 11 scene, which is obviously what I think most people will know it for. Yeah. But I think most people already know about that scene and where it comes from.
I think so. I don't think you really need to sort of go into it, do it. Like, I think, like you said, most people will already know that that scene. I mean, the most guitar amplifiers companies are sort of making amplifiers or dials that go up to 11.
Yes.
So I think everybody's probably aware of it.
I mean, I'm a fan of Ned's Atomic Dustbin. It's obviously a band from my youth that came out of Stourbridge, which is obviously, a local town to me. And I follow the lead guitarist on Twitter because they've got some gigs coming up and stuff. And he posted a picture of his guitars, which has obviously got up to 11 volume knobs on it. So I imagine they must come as standard on some guitars now. So
I would imagine so. I mean, they definitely sounded like they went up to 11 when we saw them.
Definitely. So cool. Well, that was Spinal Tap, and I'm really glad you suggested it, actually, because I really enjoyed watching it the second time. And it's not even been one of those films that I've had a massive gap. I think it's been about 10 years now. For me, that's not a massive gap, because the number of films I can fit in now is a lot less than back in the day, especially when I used to work in a video shop and I used to get them for free. So, so yeah, a good one, and quite a lot of history around it, as in like what's happened afterwards and stuff, and how it's how some of those people now are associated with that film. So
yeah, I think there's quite a lot to get into with the film, isn't there? Like, you like I don't think we've really sort of gone into the film or the scenes themselves.
We don't need to, if that's the idea of this podcast, really, because people will see those scenes for themselves. We don't need to, preach to the converted. If you're listening to this, then
that's it.
We're talking about well, either what's on our minds or other stuff around it. So.
Yeah, I think that's where the kind of interest lies with this film.
Yeah.
Everything that kind of surrounds Spinal Tap and everything that comes from Spinal Tap is kind of, that's where all the most interesting stuff I think really comes from.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, that's Spinal Tap. On to the next film, which is going to be my suggestion. I was thinking Spinal Tap is quite a big film from the era, so in order to try and level things up, should I try and pick one a little bit more low-key? Because when we first started talking about doing the 80s podcast, which is now the Retro podcast, we came up with a list of films, and some of them that we know from our youth that were not particularly massive at the time, but yet still significant. But in the end, I've decided, no, I'm going to do one that I've had on my list for a while. That is, when you think of 80s films, it's got to be in your top 10 list, if not top 5, and that is Blade Runner from 1982. Because there's a couple of things, probably games, that have reminded me about this film recently. I first watched the film. It would be in the 90s, so it wasn't, and it was late 90s as well. So the reason why I watched the film is because one of my friends said you should watch it because it's a little bit like the game Syndicate on the Amiga.
Yes, I remember that.
It obviously was a little bit like it, but then I should have really watched it in its outright, and I'm sure I would have done if I hadn't done at this point. But yeah, it's Blade Runner from 1982 that we're going to be watching for the next film.
So I'll be really looking forward to actually watching this. I think a bit like you on that one. I haven't watched that for quite a number of years now, so there's a lot of it I will have forgotten. So it'd be good to get into that one.
I'm sure that I've done an initial bit of research because I've actually already got this film for once. It is just DVD, but that'll be fine. And there's a few different versions for us to talk about, but just watch whatever version you've got or whatever version you can get a hold of, because we'll just talk about the different versions for anyone that's listening that wants to watch and take part. Just watch whatever version of the film you can get hold of, because they all contain like the main scenes, and then we'll just talk about the differences when we do the next podcast.
Okay, excellent. Sounds like a plan.
It is cool. So yeah, definitely when this goes out, check out some of the links to the documentaries or some of the TV spots that we've talked about. Definitely go and check out Big Bottom. I'll include a link to the YouTube video with the lyrics on.
Do you mean the song?
Yeah. Don't go and check out My Big Bottom, no. If you're listening to YouTube, I might see if I can try and put it onto the end of this clip anyway. But if not, just make an effort to have a little click on that link and just listen to some of the lyrics. They're legendary, and you'll never be able to get it out of your head as well. So cool. So that's about it from me. Anything else to say, Rich?
No, I think that's it from me as well. Covered everything I think we can.
Cool. Right. We'll finish this recording there then, and we'll go off and play some computer games. So until next time, see you guys.
See you later.
Bye.